Hey everyone, Brian here. Hope you're doing well despite the impending apocalypse. Before we start, I wanted to drop a quick plug to our D&D pals over at Adventurers Coffee Company. Their link is in the description below, and I highly recommend checking them out. If you want to buy any of their savory and fragrant brews, make sure to use the discount code Mr. Ripper upon checkout, as it'll net you a fat 10% off your purchase. Their prices are already pretty damn good, so it's a steal of a deal. Now, I'd never support something I didn't try personally, and thankfully, I was given a delicious bag of their Dungeons and Dark Roast to sample for all you lucky lads and ladies out there. And I must say, not only are they fast on the delivery, but I absolutely love drinking a cup of that smoky, roasted goodness with my bacon and eggs in the morning, like a true American would. Now, without further interruption, let's get back on track to the meat of this video, shall we? D&D players of Reddit, what are your craziest stories from your campaigns? Part 1. We had a player who was 27 years old. His parents were so rich that he had a live-in maid and he still lived at home. This kid would freak out if anything happened to his character. So, anyway, we were playing an evil campaign, which was fine because the entire universe I created consisted of evil characters and factions in a multi-dimensional landscape. In the campaign, all of the characters were hired by a demon overlord to go do something. The group was then enticed to try and find ways to betray and overthrow their demon lord. Problem was, since all of the players were evil, they weren't shy about backstabbing each other. During the climax of the storyline, one of the players decided, without telling everybody else, that he was actually going to remain loyal to the Overlord. So he starts attacking everybody while they're battling something else, and wins. Then the 27-year-old kid freaks out and starts shouting and screaming at the other player. Then it devolved when another player started throwing punches. Then, one of the players put another into a headlock. That group never met up again. Playing a homebrew campaign, managed to take down a warlock in his lair, and our wizard got a hold of one of his wands, and eventually discovered that it was a wand of mass teleportation that required a level of skill, read character level, and intelligence that he couldn't competently use. Quite a while later, we found ourselves being chased by a dragon that would absolutely obliterate us if we tried to fight it. So, we decided to take a chance and use this wand. DM says roll a d20 skill check and beat a 32. He has to roll a 17 or higher to have any control of where the teleport would take us. Oh no, he rolled a 1, critical failure. DM chuckles and says it's okay. Roll a d100 to see where this failed teleport will take you. The higher the number, the less risk involved. Wizard grabs the 2 dice needed for a d100 roll. Oh no, gets a 1 out of 100. Dude managed to roll a crit failure on a d20, followed by an even more impressive crit failure on a d100. Our DM broke character and started laughing because how the fuck does that even happen? And then says, okay, I guess you teleport to the worst possible location in this world. We teleported right into the lair of the big bad boss our DM hadn't thought we'd fight until at least level 14 plus. We were at level 4. We died. I played a character who was incredibly anxious and would piss I wasn't ready for that. And would piss themselves when faced with sudden danger. After we defeated the big bad of our short campaign, I joked that my character died of pneumonia. The DM made me roll for it, so my character legit died from pissing himself to death after we beat the campaign. I was a Dragonborn bard. The group led us to a battle with wisps. Upon killing them, I took critical damage. The rest of the group heard rustling in the bushes and a wooden robot came out of the trees. Whenever they attacked the robot, my body screamed in pain. Turns out the wisp put my consciousness into the robot. When we discovered this, I promptly picked my body up and used him as a backpack for the rest of the campaign. Back when I used to play, my dice were cursed. Not like in a role-playing way. My dice were really cursed and it was so frustrating. Anytime we had combat of any sort, natural ones for days. I just failed every attack every time. The one exception was having my character do ridiculous flourishes. If I wanted to bluff, intimidate, whatever, I'd roll like a god. But once the action started, forget it. It became an ongoing joke with our group, and anytime we started a new campaign or made new characters, I died like a lot. Instead of focusing on combat, I simply built charisma and things like that. It was a little upsetting sometimes not being involved with some great action sequences our DM put together, but the cursed dice really helped me learn how to roleplay. Strangely enough, I never used a bard. I was playing a one-shot game at my girlfriend's New Year's Eve party because she'd never played before, and her best friend was DMing. We were running some random adventure that the friend had cooked up a while ago with some pre-gen characters. No one was taking anything terribly seriously. At one point, my girlfriend's brother, who was also playing, goes into the square of a town to start preaching the word of Cthulhu, and the cleric joins in. My character, a tiefling sorcerer, walked outside to see what the commotion was. When told about the word of Cthulhu, she laughed and brushed it off. The cleric, on a natural 19 religion roll, I forget the modifiers, proceeds to summon Cthulhu and have him smite me with a lightning bolt and knock me utterly unconscious. We had a couple of good ones. Setting the scene for the group, we're all 30-something-year-old guys that worked together and decided to get a group going. Played once a month or so at someone's house. I had never played before, and 2 other guys hadn't played since high school. One guy still played, but was between groups when we started up. One guy was playing 2 characters. Both were psionics. One was a half-giant barbarian named Tabitharia or something, but we ended up calling her Tabby. Oh, thank God, because I can't pronounce that name. Though she was a psionic, she was more or less a meat shield. We started using her as our interrogator. If someone didn't want to give us info, his other character, basically Tabby's handler, would snap his fingers and say, "Tabby, shake 'em." And Tabby would grab the NPC and shake them violently. Think Hulk fighting Loki in the Avengers. It becomes a bit of an inside joke with the group, and a lot of fun was had. So DM was leading us toward dethroning Leoth. He overpowered our characters right from the start, which we were all fine with. We thought it might be fun to play wickedly overpowered characters that ended up with enough power to kill a god. I had discussed with him from the beginning that I wanted to start off lawful good and end up lawful evil. He came up with the idea of giving me a sentient warhammer that was evil and would corrupt me from a lawful good paladin into a lawful evil blackguard. The hammer had whispered things to me and slowly corrupted me during our campaign. The DM and I were the only ones that knew this. More of this later. One night we were at my house playing, and it had been a rough night. Bad rolls all around, and we were basically just exhausted. We were determined to get through an encounter, and we're just pushing through. During the course of the journey, the psionic handler of Tabby had picked up a sword, enchanted with Vorpal. He was always careful to only use it when really needed, because he didn't want to screw anything up with a bad roll. Because we were getting our asses handed to us, he charges in with the Vorpal sword and attempts to end things. We warned him not to, but he was getting grumpy. He attacks and rolls, critical miss. We start to snicker. DM shakes his head. DM warned him that a critical miss would likely mean bodily harm to himself and tells him to roll for what part of his body he hacks off with the sword. Rolls again. 1. He cut off his own head. The table erupts and we're all hysterically laughing. Dude gets up, promptly packed his stuff up, and leaves. We end up restoring him through a time warp something or other the next session, but we still bring up the time he cut his own head off with a critical miss. Now, towards the end of the campaign, I tell the DM one day at work that I want to make my change to Blackguard at our next session. I tell him I have an idea, but I'm telling no one. I just need him to go along with me. He agrees. So the next session, we start heading towards Leoth's realm. We had unlocked the way in and we're making our way there. At this point, I was more or less listening to the sentient hammer. I hadn't committed that one atrocious act yet that sends me over the edge and makes me fall from a paladin into a blackguard. Our other friend had been playing a character that had contracted lycanthropy. He hadn't had his first change yet, but it was coming. So he starts to change before we go into Leoth's realm. Everyone else is like, "Oh man, you okay? Can you control this?" I'm sitting back. Mid-change, I renounce my faith as a paladin and swing this giant hammer at our friend. I call that I'm aiming for his head. I roll a 20. Critical hit. Everyone, including the DM, are sitting with their mouths open. DM politely explains that because I called that I was aiming for his head and I critically hit, his head explodes like an overripe watermelon. He's dead. Our buddy is sitting in silence while the other guy, who had killed himself with a Vopal, is doubled over laughing. This guy was almost in tears. He had wanted that werewolf so badly, and I killed him. The session ended there, as one guy couldn't breathe from laughing, and the other guy was almost in tears. But no one saw it coming, including the DM, and the story still gets told now and then. I acquired a bag of holding, and, without the knowledge of the rest of the party, told the DM I shad in it every day. I also got our tinkering ranger to build me a mousetrap-like contraption. The plan was, after months and months of shit, when fighting the dragon to the big bad, I'd whip out my bag of holding and huck it at the boss, and have Mousetrap flip the bag inside out mid-air, so the boss would be knocked out and a massive shit-splosion. Yes! Tell me it worked! Aw no, unfortunately our DM group fell apart before this came to pass. We're on an airship hundreds of feet in the air with nothing but ocean under us and an island in the distance that we can tell is swarming with dragons, when a couple barely able to fly and already hurt dragons start coming our way, presumably to scare us measly level 5s off. The DM is laying the groundwork for a Tiamat campaign and doesn't actually expect us to do anything except maybe exchange a couple blows, possibly down one of the dragons to where it can't fly anymore, then turn around and tell our quest giver that things aren't so great. We're loading up massive airship crossbows. The crew is arming up and starting to shoot at the injured dragons, and we're trying to decide how long we should stick around when our dwarf werebear bear totem barbarian, basically a tank that can take any hit except his one weakness of severe brain damage, decides that today's the day he truly tests his athletic prowess and the abilities of his jerry-rigged grappling hook. We're all screaming in simultaneous, "I can't believe you'd be so stupid," and "I really want to see this work." Remember, we're hundreds of feet off the water. No amount of memeing our dreams can help him survive a fall from this high. Naturally, seeing two dragons coming to our airship with the express purpose of killing it before we interfere with the summoning ritual, he decides to jump from the ship onto one of them, and succeeds wonderfully. He does a smack or two, then spends his next turn successfully jumping to the next one. This second and final dragon starts collapsing as the party does enough damage to it over 2 or 3 turns, the entire time of which we were screaming for the idiot to jump back before it's too late. He makes one final roll to jump back to the airship from the falling dragon and just barely catches the very bottom of what he can reach. Then, just barely makes a good enough roll to not fall off the edge while climbing up. I had to leave the group because they were all a bunch of murder hobo munchkins, which is the complete opposite of my playstyle. But I'll always hold the emotional highs and lows of that moment dear to my heart.